matchup. You know, he's got Knight in main, which is obviously very good against Brad's deck, and he's got a couple one-ofs, like the one of Electrickery in Sunnell's deck would actually be just unbelievably good against Brad's token strategy. So I definitely think that Brad is a slight underdog, but if you draw your defensive cards at the right time, and the Electrickery and the one of Bonfire don't come off the top, then it's definitely possible to win.
And we saw Brad. I think we felt that he was kind of an underdog in the last match against Richard Winwood. He was able to take that down, stabilize defensively, and then turn the corner, which is, again, one thing that Richard Wynn's deck didn't do very well, and kind of the same can be said for Zombies, is they don't play defense very well. So if you can't actually pull ahead, it's hard for them to come back. They do have tools like Falconwrath Aristocrat and 2 copies of Hellrider to be able to maybe turn things back in their favor. But I think once Brad's able to get his defenses set up, he's actually able to win the game. The question is, can he get him set up in time? As you see, Sunnell's going to come across here with a Diregraph Ghoul against Nelson's Doom Traveler.
Yeah, Brad is definitely going to be the control here. He's going to have to try and sort of stabilize at least game one. He has a pretty unique sideboard plan that I'll go over in a minute, but game one, he's certainly the control. He's going to have to try and stabilize at a reasonable life total and sort of grind the game out and win that way, which, as you said, is quite difficult against 4-mana hasty monsters.
So you're going to see Nelson come across with Doom Traveler. Going to follow that up with the Cartel Aristocrat and pass the turn back. Sunnell played a Blood Crypt tapped. He does have 2 copies of Searing Spear in his hand. Also looking at a Liliana the Veil. Draws a Swamp for the turn. And his last card is a Falconwrath Aristocrat. So he does have the necessary mana to cast that, but he doesn't really have a very aggressive draw thus far. In a deck that does have 8 1-drops in Gravecrawler and Diregraph Cool, has Draw's Messenger, has those main deck Knight of Infamies and Bloodthrone Vampires. You haven't seen any of that shown up just yet.
Yeah, the way that these draws are matching up right now, Brad's got to be pretty happy. Cartel Aristocrat, one of the key cards in this matchup, and he doesn't know it, but Sunnell with the Liliana the Veil in hand, one of the weaker cards against Brad's deck, definitely got to be happy of the way that this draw developed. It very easily could have gone 1-drop into Knight of Infamy into Geralf's Messenger, and Brad would be completely on the back foot, but he's got to be feeling at least a little more confident than before the game started.
So here comes Diregraph Gold. Nelson going to block immediately. He's going to try to sacrifice this. We're going to see a Searing Spear, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the trade that Brad, knew could happen. He makes you wonder if he's okay with this happening.
Yeah, he actually said that he was going to try and bait the spears out. Cartel Aristocrat's one of the cards that is actually, quite good, and Jeremy's got to be happy to be able to have an opportunity to spear that, because as the game goes along, it gets a lot harder to kill it. But Brad is looking at a Sorin in his hand and a Lingering Souls, so that looks like that's going to be his sort of game plan, is to go with a token strategy and potentially even just race in the air.
It looks like he's going to start getting in the air. 1 in the air is going to put Sunnell down to 18. You see Nelson at 16. Looking at that Lingering Souls. Looking at a Tragic Slip in his hand as well, so he does have Falconwrath Aristocrat covered if need be. See if Nelson's going to play a spell here, or is he going to hold a Tragic Slip for a rainy day? That's the big question right now.
It actually looks like he has a backup Cartel Aristocrat, which makes it more reasonable to, expose yours to a Searing Spear, as well as having the Sorin follow up. You don't want that thing being burned out. You want that to be harder to kill, and it looks like Varal's is the answer.
Okay. So Varal's the Scar Stripe is going to come into play. Sunnell's going to draw his card for the turn. It looks like it may have been another land. Is he going to play a Swamp here? And so we do know he has the 4 mana for Falconwrath Aristocrat. Staring at that Searing Spear. Aristocrat's going to come on down. He's going to attack Nelson for 4 in the air. Going to put Brad down to 12. Brad going to quickly untap. He does have a Tragic Slip in his hand, so he's not terribly concerned right now with that Falconwrath Aristocrat. And you see Sunnell's hand again of Dragon Skull Summit, Liliana the Veil, and Searing Spear. So again, if you're Nelson, you're not getting your brains beat in by zombies this game, so you're feeling pretty happy.
Absolutely, and the second Searing Spear without a good target. There's no High Priest or Blood Artist in play, at least not yet, and this looks like a fairly stable position for Brad with the slip for the Aristocrat, and Sunnell's hand not too impressive. against Brad's. I mean, Brad's hand is just like all gas, whereas Sunnell, the Liliana is quite bad. Searing Spear not that great, and the fifth land obviously not very good either.
Yeah, Liliana, a virtual mulligan against Brad's deck, but certainly a mulligan in this situation where it's just not getting any better. Brad does have, as you said, Sorin, Lord of Innistrad. He has Lingering Souls. He can really navigate around that. And so, I mean, that's a card that someone's going to reach for to sideboard out, as he only has 2 in his deck, but he can find any card in his sideboard that's better than that one.
Yeah, that one's got to be the first one out. Edict effects against, token makers, usually not where you want to be. And Brad with a ton of options. 4 very good spells in hand, not to mention the ability to scavenge either of the creatures in his graveyard. So he comes up with an attack, and it looks like this is just going to be Lingering Souls plus Tragic Slip.
Okay.
Which, it's sort of the natural play.
Yeah.
But there's obviously no reason not to walk through it and make sure that there's not some sort of counterattack or other sort of tactical positioning you can get going to generate more of an advantage and then save the slip for a later turn.
And there's a lot of different things we could have seen Brad do that turn. He has a Blood Artist in his hand. He could have, played a Blood Artist, scavenged his Doom Traveler in his graveyard, maybe onto his Varls to make that a 3/3 to trump the Diregraph Ghoul. And then, then he still has Tragic Slip available as well, so that would leave him with that flyer, a 3/3 Varls, and a Tragic Slip, which I think would be a pretty good line as well.
Yeah.
It's arguable about which one is right or wrong. As you said, the Lingering Souls plus Tragic Slip line makes perfect sense as well.
Yeah, it's just the difference between, being a 60% favorite and a 63% favorite or whatever, these marginal differences to sort of push your advantage when you feel you're ahead. And I have to say that Brad, not only do I believe that he's ahead, but he's got to believe he's ahead.
Yeah. I definitely think he likes where he is at right now in this game. See Sunnell's hand, his draw for the turn with a Bloodthorn Vampire, a card that is much better on turn 2 than it is on turn 5. Because Brad is just, again, doing what his deck does. Gumming up the air, gumming up the ground, making it impossible to actually get through. If he's ever able to just get all of these things on the board, as we saw against Richard Wynn yesterday in the quarterfinals, it's very hard for him to ever break through. But additionally, it's not hard for Brad to actually start attacking the opponent.
Yeah, I mean, his sequence here of Lingering Souls with Slip for the Aristocrat and then presumably Sorin on the untap is really backbreaking. That's exactly the the way that Brad needs to turn the corner and close out the game against these burn heavy aggressive decks. And especially with Sunnell's deck having access to the one of Electricity, the one of Bonfire, you want to get him dead before he draws to those.
Yeah. So now we're going to see Liliana the Veil join the party, and if you're Sunnell, you're not terribly pleased with having to play this, but you realize that this is probably something I have to play, as this is actually going to be moving up.
Yeah, I mean he's got to exchange resources at some point. I mean he knows that the cards in his hand are no good, and pretty much no matter what was in Brad's hand, it was going to be better than that Bloodthorn Vampire for Jeremy. So this is his way of trading, which makes sense. What is actually very interesting is that Brad chose to keep his Blood Artist rather than his Sorin.
Yeah, I think he knows the importance of Blood Artist in these matchups. As we've seen it before, your Zombie Mirror, your Black Mirror, what have you. Blood Artist can dominate a game all on its own, and it forces the opponent to have a removal spell for it, because you've got Varls out there willing to sacrifice guys. You've got these guys that would love to trade.
Absolutely.
And you get all those drains and gains.
Yeah, pad your life total and close out the game at the same time. Blood Artist is quite good against these aggressive strategies. And here we see that Blood Artist.
It looks like Brad drew another Tragic Slip for the turn, which isn't going to be very good right now, as you're going to see an activation of Varls targeting Blood Artist. Going to remove the Doom Traveler, so he wants to make that into a 1/2 and get around Tragic Slip, which is a card Jeremy has 3 copies of, but Searing Spear is going to take care of that. That's the last card in Sunnell's hand.
That is the second copy of Searing Spear when Jeremy only has 2, and Brad knows that, so it was much more likely that Tragic Slip was the card there rather than Searing Spear. But now that he's fine trading there, because now he knows what is up. Jeremy's completely hellbent. He gets the regeneration on the Varals and gets a good attack off on the Liliana with a Tragic Slip in hand. Yeah, really, really stable position for Brad.
Yeah, and if that last card is Tragic Slip, which we're pretty sure it is, we can make an argument for just, all right, take care of the Diregraph Ghoul, kill your Liliana, and just start to press his advantage and make Jeremy draw, basically perfect, which is pretty tough for him to do, because again, Zombies is a deck that does not play defense very well.
Yeah, and with Brad having the Lingering Souls in the yard as backup, as well as a couple more scavenges, he definitely has more options going longer than Jeremy, who's just playing straight up off the top of his deck.
Nelson gonna reach for these Lingering Souls tokens. 3 towards Liliana. Gonna push that down to 1.
Okay. Oh, it's a land.
All right, so it's a gap.
It's a little more than a land.
Yeah, it's may or may not be the best card he can have right now, which is Gavony Township. 2 Spirit tokens are going to come into play, and he has the necessary lands to activate said township for the rest of the game. So if you're going to draw a land that turn, that's the best one he could draw.
Yeah, absolutely. He's hellbent against the Liliana that can't even Edict, which even if he could, it wouldn't be that good. Jeremy playing off the top of his deck with Brad having a very scary board. I mean, he's near lethal.
Liliana going up. He's going to discard Gravecrawler and get it back.
Value.
Yep.
Value.
So he passes the turn back. Nelson's going to quickly untap. He draws his card. I believe it was a Young Wolf was his draw step. Won't be needing that one, I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to guess, this would just be a township activation, kill Liliana, send for 8 to the dome. This is the point where Brad is really able to turn a corner. That's what this deck does, is since it's stabilizing with creatures, it's able to start attacking as soon as it's stabilized and close out the game really, really quickly.
You see Brad doing a little bit of math here, trying to figure out how much can I attack. I'm at 13 life. How aggressive can I get? How can I shorten this game as quickly as possible? As you see, he's going to put, looks like 1 Lingering Spirit token this way. And he's actually just going to turn everybody sideways. Again, he knows that Sunnell doesn't have any cards in his hand. What's the worst thing that can happen to me this turn is probably his thought, which is a card like Bonfire of the Damned, which is, pretty good, but not great because it's going to leave Varls around. And Varls can kind of dominate that Gravecrawler and that Diregraph Ghoul. So you see everybody coming in and put Sunnell on the test. You got 1 blocker. Here's a township activation. Everybody's going to get a little bit bigger.
Yep. Taking 13, or no, 11. That's a pretty big number. Going down to 5 and Liliana dying.
So you're going to see the die for that. And the die is going to take care of all those spirit tokens, assuming they have enough dice out there. So many creatures.
Brad is sick of it. He's over it. He realizes that, he has his opponent dead next turn. And
yeah, Sunnell's going to draw his card. He draws the Blood Artist. He's going to concede the game. So Nelson is going to win game number 1 here against Jeremy Sunnell. Junk Aristocrats up a game against Black Red Zombies. As we're going to bring it back to the booth because it is trivia time early this morning. We'll explain the rules to you guys because it's pretty simple. I am going to ask you a question because I gave him all night to get a question ready for the semifinals.
Couldn't come up with one.
He couldn't do it. So it's very simple. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to hashtag your answer on Premium with the hashtag of SCG, or excuse me, on Twitter with the hashtag of SCG Premium. We will select 1 winner of the people who do get this correct. So again, it is about accuracy, not speed. Winner gets 6 months of Premium, and we will draw our winner at the conclusion of our semifinals. And that question is... That's my drum roll. In Brad Nelson's deck, he has... Well, we could say there are 6 Doom Traveler effects. There are 4 actual Doom Travelers, and then there are 2 replacement Doom Travelers in his deck. It is a 1-drop, and it is of a different color than Doom Traveler. So if you're able to name that card, that 2 of in Brad's deck, that is very similar to a Doom Traveler type effect for what he's trying to accomplish, tweet your answer, hashtag SCG Premium, and again, we will select 1 winner who's able to name this very difficult card.
Very powerful.
Yes, and answer this horribly difficult question at the conclusion of this round. So again, hashtag your answer, SCG Premium on Twitter, and we will figure out who wins at the conclusion of our semifinal. But we are going to go over sideboards here for you, my friends. Jeremy Sunnell going to be on the play, and I'm going to go over Sunnell's list because I know that you know Brad Nelson's sideboarding plan since you spoke with him this morning. We look at Sunnell's sideboard. He has 2 copies of Blasphemous Act, 2 Appetite for Brains, 2 Vampire Nighthawks, an additional Let Trickery, a second Bonfire of the Damned in his sideboard, 2 Pillar of Flame, 1 Blood Scrivener, 2 Cremates, and 2 Mark of Mutiny. You guys are able to see it there on the screen at home. And the cards that are probably going to come in here, I actually think Nighthawk is pretty good in this matchup.
I agree.
Just because it's a flyer, it's going to gain some life. It's going to be kind of difficult for it to get through and really accumulate anything without like a Rancor type effect. But it is something that Brad actually has to care about. So I think that's going to come in. I think Trickery is going to come, and I think the first one is good. The second one's equally as good. An additional Bonfire of the Damned as well, playing that role, similar to Trickery, lets him have 2 after sideboard. Then from there, there's not a lot of great cards. Pillar of Flame seems marginal at best.
No, Pillar's definitely coming in. If for nothing else, straight up for Voice of Resurgence.
Okay,
but
sure.
actually, one of the key sort of axes that these guys are going to be fighting over is the High Priest. Skursdag High Priest from Brad's deck is pretty important because Jeremy doesn't really have a good answer to a 5/5, let alone a stream of 5/5s. So
Sure.
being able to kill a High Priest, mana efficiently and immediately is going to be really, really important. So for High Priest and Voice, I think that Pillar's got to come in.
Okay. The question is, what is he going to sideboard out for all these cards? The 2 Lilianas is obvious.
Yeah,
those are going to go immediately. Do you leave in Tragic Slip in this matchup where there's probably a decent amount of Morbid happening? I think the Mark of Mutiny in his main deck is going to go. He's going to want that additional Bonfire like Trickery. So it looks like we're boarding out around 3 cards. Maybe he's boarding out some creatures. Like maybe Bloodthorn Vampire is pretty poor because it's so hard to actually get through and have an impact. So
yeah,
he can probably find some things to board in these 5 or 6 cards that he's looking at.
No, I definitely think it's Liliana, Mark, and Bloodthorn Vampire, and then you can find another slot or 2 if you need them. But those are the cards that are like clearly underpowered against Brad's deck.
And on Brad's end,
he's actually
inside information over here.
He's actually got a pretty awesome sideboard plan here. He knows he's not favored, especially post board, and so he's come up with a pretty ingenious sideboard plan, which is he's actually going leaner and is going to try and sort of create an almost racing situation rather than sort of stabilize and then take over a controlling role. And he's actually cutting his Gavany townships, going down to 23 lands, cutting the Sorin of Innistrad, Lord of Innistrad, because it's 4 mana and matches up really, really poorly against Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Okay.
And he was talking about shaving a Lingering Souls for the same reason, just going smaller and leaner. He actually thinks the Doom Traveler might even be better than Lingering Souls in this matchup, which seems ridiculous to say, but it's 1 mana versus 3 and 2.
Sure.
And yeah, he's gonna try and go a little leaner, a little more aggressive, and actually race, since the zombie deck is obviously really bad at blocking, really bad at defense, whereas Brad's deck can actually play defense fairly well. He's got, this stream of chump blockers. Voice of Resurgence Elemental token, obviously quite good. The Blood Artist, very important here. And Brad is actually going to be leaning quite heavily on the Skursdag High Priest. He said that Voice, while seemingly good, is actually not as good as the High Priest. Like, he's going to actively use Voice as bait to get the High Priest into play. That's how good he thinks it is.
Well, I think, as you said, it only takes 1 Skursdag High Priest activation for him to win this game, or at least get ridiculously far ahead in the game.
Absolutely. And that is the game plan he's going to go with. If you play a Voice and it doesn't get pillared, then your opponent doesn't have Pillar. And if it does get pillared, then that's a Pillar that he doesn't have for your High Priest. So that's sort of the type of draw that Brad's looking for. What's really important to him is to not flood out. He feels like he can win if he can stop on 3 or 4 lands and have just all cheap spells. And if the game goes long and he starts to flood, then he feels like he can actually lose. So he is opting for the lower curve. You see the Deathrite Shaman there, not only to lower your curve, but also added value against Gravecrawlers and Geralf's Messengers, and is just a cheap card that lets you do something with your mana to help prevent flooding. And there is the key card right there.
So he leads off with Skursdag High Priest, basically forcing Sunnell to have a Searing Spear or a Pillar of Flame and get that thing off of the table. You see him reaching for a Knight of Infamy.
That is not quite a removal spell, and it looks like Brad has a white land, a Cartel Aristocrat, and a Doom Traveler, so he is making a 5/5, unless this is a Pillar? I didn't see one. Looks like a couple spears.
Is this a Gravecrawler that's going to come down? Oh, it is.
Knight of Infamy, quite good. Protection from white against, Voice of Resurgence and Lingering Souls tokens is pretty good, but it doesn't have protection from 5/5 demons.
Brad going to make this play pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Cartel Aristocrat. Here's Doom Traveler. And I think you just make it on the main phase, right? So that you don't get. Is there anything you can get blown out by waiting?
No, because the sacrifice makes Morbid active right away, so you
Okay.
can activate the High Priest right away. The only way that you could get blown out is if you needed the Doom Traveler token creature, because you respond to that trigger.
Sure, but he does not need
But
that
he's got the
this
extra Deathrite Shaman there, so he doesn't have to activate now. Although, there's very little reason not to be honest. But yeah, I mean, we saw Jeremy had Searing Spear in his hand and had mana last turn, and he chose to develop his board rather than kill the High Priest. Meanwhile, Brad was saying that High Priest was like one of the most important cards, and he was really hoping to protect it and utilize it. And Jeremy had a different evaluation of the way that the games were going to play out, and he is actually in a lot of danger of losing thanks to that sort of misassignment, whereas Brad correctly evaluated what was important and is able to capitalize on Jeremy's sort of misassignment of his role.
You see, in response to the Blood Artist, Brad is going to sacrifice the Doom Traveler, put the Spirit into play so he is not drained for one, and let Sunnell gain a life here, as every point does matter in this matchup. So now he has the Morbid necessary for Skursak High Priest to be able to pump out a 5/5, and you can see Jeremy's delay on this turn because he knows that he doesn't really have a very good attack. I mean, he can send in Grave Crawlers because he's able to get one back, maybe, and get a Blood Artist trigger or two, but I mean, it's not an ideal attack, and I'm sure that Cartel Aristocrat probably named Black as well for the protection, and now you see him beginning to turn some things sideways, but he's got to know that a 5/5 is about to come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe this means that Sunnell has a Tragic Slip in his hand, but I mean, this forces him to have a Tragic Slip.
I think this is. I honestly think that this is more of a desperation attack, hoping that he can get some sort of favorable combat, get his Gravecrawlers back, and get on the drain train with Blood Artist.
Sure.
I think that he feels like painting a picture is his best way out of this pretty sticky situation. A demon is hard to deal with, and I think that Brad is just fine with this. I mean, that Aristocrat gets to jump in front of one of the Gravecrawlers pretty much for free, and the demon can theoretically eat the Knight of Infamy, and Brad's only drained for 2 there and deals with the Knight of Infamy. I think that's wow. It is Tragic Slip. Good call. So that is another drain from the Blood Artist, and Cartel Aristocrat is white, so can't block the Knight of Infamy, but now that mana is tapped, the Gravecrawler can't come back right away, so you get that block. Another drain off, 4 damage. Brad taking 5, plus the drain from the Tragic Slip. That's a pretty good turn from Jeremy, as well as he can do in that situation.
Yeah. So he's starting to make a little bit of headway here. As Brad's going to untap, he's going to draw. You see a Young Wolf is the draw step for the turn to go along with Doom Traveler, Tragic Slip, and another Cartel Aristocrat. So he's got 3 lands to work with. He has a High Priest. He has the card that he wants in the matchup. And now you see Brad start to slide over one of those green-black lands for that Deathrite Shaman, saying, oh, maybe a little life gain is in order here.
I think that gaining 2 and removing a Gravecrawler is a pretty good sequence there. He's also got some 1-drops, and is that a Tragic Slip in his hand as well? So he can slip the Blood Artist, which is really Jeremy's game plan here. That's his reach. That's his way to kill Brad. So he can slip that to get Morbid, make a 5/5, and play a Doom Traveler and remove the Gravecrawler. That's a nice turn from Brad. And as you can see, Brad lowering his curve and cutting some lands because he didn't want to flood. That is exactly what's happening. He said that his best way to win this unfavorable matchup was to stop at 3 lands and have all spells, all cheap spells, and that's what's happening.
So Tragic Slip's going to begin the turn. It's going to take down Blood Artist. Sunnell's going to gain 1. Nelson's going to take 1. You see Nelson going to activate the Deathrite Shaman. Looks like the green half here. Going to get himself some life. Get that Gravecrawler out of here. No rebuys on that one. Going to push Nelson up to 10. And now that 3rd mana, it's either going to be a Doom Traveler or Young Wolf. It is going to be Doom Traveler. It is going to be a activation of Skursak High Priest. There's your 5/5 Jerry Thompson Demon. And now Cartel Aristocrat and the Demon are standing tall on the battlefield.
This is quite a defense. A Miracle Bonfire is definitely not bad. I mean, it takes out the High Priest and the Deathrite Shaman, as well as a token. You're going to get a token back from the Doom Traveler, and the Aristocrat gains 1,000,000 protections. You still get you still have your 5. Oh,
Oh,
did he
no.
miss it?
I think he did miss it.
Oh no, that's actually huge. That Cartel Aristocrat was, one of the big pieces of Brad's defense, but kind of, I don't want to say tilts, but a little upset at the Miracle Bonfire. He actually just binned his guys before activating his Cartel Aristocrat, and now his defenses are not looking as impressive as they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, Gravecrawler actually kind of gets a free attack here too because of Exalted.
Yeah,
and it will actually finish off the demon.
Yeah, the
because
demon
it has 2 damage on it.
2 damage from the bonfire. Very good point. That is a nice attack from Jeremy, and Brad trying to figure out what he has to do now to win. I mean, I can't really see the chump block being right here. I don't know what Brad's hand is, but I mean, I think he's got the Young Wolf, which seems like the better blocker.
Currently, his hand is Young Wolf and Cartel Aristocrat.
Okay, so he's got another Aristocrat, and he can cast the 2 spells next turn. So maybe it is right to just chump here, preserve your life total, because your board's going to be fairly powerful once again next turn.
So you are going to see the chump block. As you said, he's going to preserve his life total. He's going to untap, draw. Varro's a Scar Strip is his draw for the turn.
That one's not bad either. I think that you have to play 2 spells this turn, but next turn Varro's is actually going to be quite scary. And Brad, as he was telling me this morning, he's more of a racing deck now. Because the Zombies deck plays defense so poorly, he's able to just get his beat on.
He wants to get aggressive, and that's what he does. Swings in with the 5/5. He wants to close this game out as fast as he can. Cut those draw steps for Sunnell, as he did in the last game. As Sunnell draws a Gravecrawler for his turn to go along with that Searing Spear and that Electrickery. You see 2 decks that are quote-unquote stuck on 3 lands, but I think this is actually where they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is 3 lands, all spells.
Absolutely, and we're seeing some really cool interactions here with the bonfire doing a fair amount of damage, but not as much as you might have hoped. Well, theoretically, if the Aristocrat, but and then the Electrickery in Jeremy's hand actually looking quite poor, and this is due to the fact that Brad was shaving heavily on his token strategy, boarding in things like Deathrite Shaman, which has 2 toughness for God knows why.
Yeah.
But boarding out the Sorens and shaving a Lingering Souls definitely sort of softens the blow from the 2 Electrickeries and 2 bonfires that Jeremy has access to post-board.
So let's see what Sunnell wants to do on this turn, because you can feel that things are siding with Sunnell right now after that Bonfire of the Dam cleared up everything. Bonfire has its way to turn games around on occasion, but you can feel that things are kind of siding with Sunnell right now, and he's probably thinking, I need to just try to win this game. Like, the longer this game goes, the worse it is for me.
Absolutely.
Especially because I don't have 4 lands. Like, I don't want to draw a land, but I don't want to draw Falconmouth Aristocrat because I can't cast it.
Yeah. Aristocrats and Hellriders are actually pretty bad.
So if I can magically draw those 2 cards together, that would be perfect. but I can't do that. So I need to figure out a way to kind of make this game stay in my favor. That Bonfire turned things around for me, but this Cartel Aristocrat and this Young Wolf are making things difficult again for me to actually just be able to get through.
Yeah, the defense from Brad is really good, and obviously the 5/5 is a giant clock that is very hard for Jeremy to deal with. I mean, that was what Brad's plan was all along. You get a 5/5, a 5 toughness creature out, and Jeremy's deck has quite a bit of difficulty dealing with it. So this is kind of a free block for the Young Wolf on the Knight of Infamy. The question is whether Brad wants to eat the Gravecrawler, sacrificing the Young Wolf, or just try and trade the Young Wolf for the Knight of Infamy and take 2 damage, which I actually think is correct here. It's a little scary, but
it's a really neat attack there, because if Brad blocks with the Cartel Aristocrat and the Gravecrawler and then sacrifices, then you're going to see Electrickery or whatever, and then the Knight's not going to die. But now you're going to see Young Wolf come back. Gravecrawler gets in for 2, it's going to knock Nelson down to 6. So it's Sunnell's way of getting in 2 points of damage with a creature that probably shouldn't be able to get through 2 points of damage at that point. So he makes a kind of a unique attack, trying to kind of quote-unquote offers up the Knight of Infamy, when really that's not what he's really doing. And again, Electrickery, we think it's easy to sideboard in, And you would see how it has application in this matchup. But Brad knows that Sunnell has those, so he is sideboarded in such a way that he's going to sidestep those. So Electrickery in reality for Sunnell is not very good.
Yeah, I mean, they're dealt 2 damage and dealt with half of a Young Wolf.
Yeah,
like, that's not the best card.
Yeah, that's not the best card at all. But I think like Sunnell may have realized that like Electrickery is not very good, at least in this game. I got to get some sort of use out of it. And I think that might be the best that he could do.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree completely. And I mean, honestly, with access to both Spear and Electrickery, Brad really didn't have any good blocks. Because if he tried to block the other way, you know, with the Aristocrat and the Sacrifice, then you can Searing Spear the Aristocrat in response to the Young Wolf Undying trigger, and then Brad, either the Aristocrat or the Demon is going down.
Yeah, the Demon's not going anywhere.
Yeah, the Demon's not going anywhere.
The Aristocrat's going down. That's
so you
what's
actually
happening.
get to Spear the Aristocrat, which is, you know, ideal. You don't get to Spear Aristocrats very often, and that would have been the second time he did this match. So we would have been pretty happy with that. But Brad, with a more natural block, I think, with the Young Wolf on the Night of Infamy, allowed Jeremy to use his Electrickery, get in that 2 damage, and now it's back on Brad. He's got the Virals, and I think he drew a Sunpillar Grove for the turn, and you saw him there pick up his Graveyard and look through it, so he's got access to Virals plus Doom Traveler Scavenge, and he's trying to do the math of, do I want the 3 toughness Cartel Aristocrat to block? Do I want the 3 toughness Young Wolf, since the Cartel Aristocrat can grow anyway? Do I want to put the counter on the Virals, since it can regenerate? Or do I want to put it on the Demon? Does that change my clock? You know, a lot of options here. I mean, the sequence is Virals land Scavenge. The question is, where do you want to put the counter and how do you attack?
Yeah.
And that's all going to depend on how Brad sets up his next turn's blocks in his mind, and that's what he's walking through right now.
And because there will be blocking next turn for Brad.
Yes,
absolutely. That much is for sure. Or, you know, he wants to create a game state where there actually like can't be no good attacks, so he doesn't have to worry about blocking, which is what he's trying to figure out with the Scavenge right now, as you said. Quick match update for you guys, as you're going to see Nelson try to figure out what to do this turn. It might take a minute or two, as it is pretty complicated. John Spires, our 8th seed, actually defeats Joe Panaccio, our 4th seed. The Nyamir goes to Spires, so we're going to have 1 Nia deck in the finals, as we knew. But we're going to see the Aaron Barrich almost complete 75 back in the finals in back-to-back tournaments. So congratulations to John Spires. We'll see you in a moment. We got to figure out who you're going to play.
Yeah, to steal a phrase from BDM, Barrich threw a hand grenade into this tournament.
Yeah.
Just not even here and just blowing up the metagame.
Yeah. So here's your Virals. There's your Scavenge on the Cartel Aristocrat. Ooh, and he is getting aggressive.
See, these are lines that you know, you go into the tank really hard for, because the natural play was to just sort of scavenge onto a blocker and attack with your Demon, but Brad went through all the iterations of the next turn's attacks and blocks and realized that this was not only his fastest clock, but his most resilient blocks. And, you know, the 5/5 is just impossible to kill before blockers, and Brad is still representing a ton of damage on the attack next turn as well.
So now it's on Sunnell, as he's drawn his card for the turn again. We know one of the last card in Sunnell's hand going into this turn was Searing Spear.
Right.
So what that follow-up card is kind of interesting, and we're not going to get a good look at it. He's reaching already. So here come Grave Crawlers. Night of Infamy, a bit of a coward, staying at home. Nelson going to block immediately. That card looks like a land, AJ. Yeah, it's a Blood Crypt.
Yep. Which, you know, as we said, the land, you don't really want to draw land, but you also have 4-drops in your deck, so it's like, you know, if you draw them both, then I guess it's okay, but if you draw, like, the 4-drops without the land or the land without the 4-drops, then it's just completely dead, which is obviously pretty important, since that's exactly what this game has been. Both players low on lands and high on cheap spells, which is exactly how Brad knew it would play out. And this is the type of game that drawing a land at this really critical position can be absolutely game-breaking.
So we're going to see some trades there. Gravecrawler is going to go to the graveyard. Virals sacrifices the Young Wolf, so Virals is going to be regenerated. And you're going to see that Jerry Thompson token does have 2 damage on it. And now, if you're Sunnell, you have a Searing Spear in your hand. All right, you're going to take down that, because they're going to be arguing to me of maybe I draw my other Searing Spear and I get to finish him off. But
yeah.
I think taking down that 5/5 is probably right. I think you have to play that land in your hand too. It's a Blood Crypt. You can't afford to play it untapped next turn in case you do draw Hellrider, because your life total certainly matters right now, as Nelson draws a Tragic Slip.
Wow, that is a good one. I mean, he's got a million Scavenges available to him, plus the Slip. I mean, with the Net of Infamy dead and Jeremy Hellbent, there are actually no cards that kill Brad immediately on the next turn, and both of his creatures can, sort of protect each other. So Brad clearly representing lethal the next turn if he just loads up on Varolz and kills the knight, sends his guys. Yep, lead with the slip, a bunch of scavenges.
We're going to put 2 counters on the Varolz. 1 counter there. Make sure he has the right number of counters. There we go. So this is going to be attack for 2, 4, 6, 8. Going to put Sunnell down to 4. And I'm pretty sure right now Sunnell is drawing dead.
Yes, I believe he is.
And Blood Crypt is going to steal
Definitely
it.
not it.
And Brad Nelson, with his unique sideboarding plan, is going to defeat, Jeremy Sunnell 2-0. Junk Aristocrats is on to the finals to see if it can dethrone the very potent Naya deck.